am joined today by Max Erosena of Color Fiction, and we're going to be talking about a very interesting game, 0 Degrees North, 0 Degrees West. So thank you for taking a little time to talk with us, Max.
No problem, no problem. So yeah, hi, I'm Max, developer, also known as Color Fiction. And yes, made Zero North, Zero West in the last 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
and finally released it this March in Steam. Hooray!
Yeah.
And so I finally have a life again. Uh,
For people that
uh,
don't know about 0 Degrees North, 0 Degrees West, why don't you kind of give us a little bit of a pitch? I know that that's kind of a hard thing to ask with this
no,
game,
it's better.
but
Uh,
so they have an idea of what we're talking about.
okay, so 0 Degrees North, 0 Degrees West is a surreal exploration game where during a cross-country road trip, you're stranded in this little mysterious town where you find this old movie theater that just takes you through this extra-dimensional walkabout through many different worlds. And I guess the only objective would be to find a way back into that small town so you can continue your cross-country road trip. But it's really just about exploring and enjoying these completely surreal and otherworldly escapes, and it's really about relaxing, and exploring.
Mm.
That's the essential basis of the game.
Yeah, I think that sums it up nicely. It's very surreal. We'll have some footage going, and people can see just how kind of crazy these landscapes get. But at the same time, as alien as everything looks, there is this sense of relaxation as you just kind of wander through. So it's a really cool kind of dichotomy. Um, the first thing I really wanted to pick your brain about was where this idea came from. It's not kind of a typical uh, idea I think that you'd run into is this surreal a game as this kind of exploration game. So what prompted you to go down this path?
Um, that's a big one.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it was really like a confluence of different ideas and inspirations that all of a sudden, one day I just had to do it in a way. There was like many things slowly bubbling until one day I was just like, I have to make this.
sure.
And the idea just like fell, and I started working on it full time. But one of the biggest things is that in many ways I was getting tired with gaming where it was it was 2013 when I first started. I was almost about to honestly stop playing games because every game was the same. It was
Sure.
go here, do that. It was all about stats, level up. Every other game started using the same menus, and
Yeah.
everything was just very formulaic. And the one thing that I loved most about gaming was being in another world and just
Mm.
exploring another world, because it's one of those mediums that really gives you that opportunity that I don't think any other, human can creation gives you. It's
Yeah, for sure.
a video game.
Especially
Yeah,
with the interaction that you can have in that
exactly.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're there in another world, and once you link in with the game, that special moment where you're in the world and exploring. It's such a joyful moment, and
Mm.
uh, and I love having those moments with games. But at the time, I wanted to do that, but I had to level up because otherwise people would kill me, or I had to go through all these different hoops. So that was one of the biggest inspirations, was just making a game where it's just a vacation in a way. You're there as a tourist. You don't necessarily have to do anything. You're there.
Mm.
And right about then I played Proteus, and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then I was like, yes, all right, this is
Yeah.
exactly what video games should go into. You're there. I mean, there's like a slight objective, but it's really just you being in this island, and just getting lost in it. And so that was a huge inspiration, because I realized that games didn't have to be a games in the sense that you derive fun from a series of rules. It's more
Mm.
you derive fun from your own self of fun, and it just opened my eyes as to what you could do. So it was that playing Proteus, and then also playing the Stanley Parable,
Mm.
which is also a game that just questions everything. It forces you on these corridors, and it's like, why are we even in these corridors? It's, it's like
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, why am I listening to this narrator when I could want to do whatever else I want to do?
Those are
So
two great games that kind of stand out
yeah,
as throwing the formula out the window, so to speak.
yeah, it's just like, all right, let's start over again. And
Um, I did want to ask you, kind of, as we're talking about this subject of creating a game that doesn't really have objectives, that doesn't really have a set of rules or formulas that you have to work within. I've seen you talk a little bit on Twitter about this, and in some of your other kind of blog posts and stuff like that, uh, about kind of that's a challenge sometimes to sell. You
yes,
know, I think at one point you were talking about talking to publishers, and they said, "Well, there's no mechanic. How can we
yes.
sell this?" Um, I wondered if you'd talk about that from kind of the development side, and how you dealt with that, and how you dealt with selling a game that I think we could say is out of the ordinary. It's
Yeah.
not a norm, and how you've dealt with that, like maybe at shows or dealing with other people. Like, how do you approach that?
Well, it's been really challenging, honestly. But I guess the beautiful thing is that it's more. It's so you were bringing up shows, and shows is the great example that it's a difficult game to explain and get people to start playing, but if they see it and they see other people playing it, they instantly want to play it. And
Mm,
once they start playing it, they instantly understand it, because I feel like it's like you were saying, it's very relaxing, beyond the sometimes some people call it aggressive visuals or very surreal. Once you start playing it, it's a very calming experience. And I think that you need to experience it first before realizing, to really understand what the game is about. And that's
mm,
something that when you bring it into words, it's there's like a bit of a disconnect that is hard to translate. But shows have been really fantastic in that way, because you have that one-on-one connection with
sure.
players, and you can quickly tell them, like, no, no, try it, trust me, and then they're like, whoa, this is cool. And then they like start bringing their friends over, and you start generating this like organic word of mouth inside of the trade show that is really cool. And I guess the internet as a whole is like a big macrocosm of that. It's like
Yeah,
a
that's
trade
true.
show, gigantic, so it probably takes a lot more time to start getting the word of mouth rolling. But yeah, the experiences with publishers and some distribution networks have been funny. I mean, they've all been very respectful, because they never know what I might do next or something like
Sure,
that. So
sure.
they're all like, yes, this is great, but it's interesting, and I understand them. I mean, they need to make money in the end, right? So they bet money essentially on proven successes in the past, so
Mm,
they're less likely to take a risk in something that might not go as they
yeah.
plan. And so having all those, like, very very formulaic games are a set bet. It's something, how it's going to work. You already have a past case studies of how to work it in marketing. So so yeah, I've been trying to find a different way to show it, and I'm not sure I've been doing a great job though. But it's
No,
great.
I think that I'll come back to this in a second. I think that the visuals too of how you've shown off the game in the trailers and all the gifs and stuff that are out there is also really effective. Your visual style is great for pulling people in. To talk about with you is the visual style, which I think is, if anybody is watching any of the gameplay or seeing any of the trailers, it's gonna just like bombard their eyes. And I think you said that some people have called it aggressive, which I think is not a bad word for it. It
Yeah.
is aggressive at first. Um, I wanted to know is if that was where you started with the art, or if it's something that kind of developed as the project developed over those 3 years, and
Um,
and how maybe that style that 0 degrees north, 0 degrees west really does have down pat has kind of evolved.
sure. So if there's gameplay footage going on, remember, seizure warning.
Yeah, that's true. It's very obvious right at the front. You make it very clear, and it is true. I'll make sure that is up before any
Before the show even
before the show
starts.
starts. We'll have a seizure warning.
But no, that's a great question. And so another part of I mean, we've been through like the whole evolution of games, and we've been seeing this constant trying to reach photorealism. At least that's what I've seen in games.
Mm.
Is that you slowly, not with the indie scenes as much, but with the AAA games as we were growing up,
Yeah.
graphics got better, hardware got better, and it was this like perfect interplay between hardware and software and trying to make like the most realistically possible engines that could be made.
Right.
And then that was like fun to follow for a while, but I feel like after Crisis, it sort of plateaued.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And that was another thing. It's like not only a game where you don't have to follow all these rules, but why not also not follow that same path? Why should I do something photorealistic? Why not should I go like totally the other direction and make something more, innovative in a different sense? Maybe grab something from cartoons, grab something from modern art, and so that was the big inspiration. Is that from the beginning I tried to make a different aesthetic for the game. So I explored with many different ways to how to approach this, and the biggest inspiration was the modern art in the 20th and 30th in the 20th century. Like at the beginning, like futurism, cubism, deconstructivism, all the isms,
Yeah.
And I just like going to the museum and looking at those paintings, like with all those like sharp angles and geometric forms, and they're all like very powerful, with the colors and the proportion. And I was like, man, that would be so cool if we could like walk through one of those paintings.
That's pretty much what I think you've put together with
Yeah,
Zero and
thanks.
Zero W. It feels like a modernist painting that you're
Thanks,
walking
yeah.
through.
Yeah,
That's a cool thing to point out as an inspiration, is that kind of modern art side of things. And you already mentioned Proteus as an inspiration.
Yes.
So as we kind of turn from talking about the game itself to kind of your background, what were some of the other inspirations for you as to get into game development at all?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously I loved games
Right, yeah.
growing up. I even tried to start a high school game dev club, and it was a source of obviously much bullying back there in the 90s.
But you started early then. In
Yeah,
high school.
I tried to, but I did this whole petition trying to get everybody to sign so we would have like a game dev class, so people could just like play games and mod them and do all these things. But then I went to college and I studied architecture, and I worked in the field for a while, and that's where I became really passionate about 3D modeling and just making like crazy environments. So whenever I had like free time, I would just make like weird cities, like small projects, and for no use, but it was like a fun experiment to do.
Sure.
And also like I did a bunch of like a mixture between art and architecture shows with friends, like during the summers of college. So that was like my first experiment in making I guess like experiential things,
Sure.
because it was kind of like art exhibits, but it was an installation, So for example, we made one with these like plastic bags, and we like strewn all these plastic bags into like a huge maze through a gallery.
Cool.
So it was like kind of like going to this weird like kelp forest, but made of like plastic bags, and so you would have this experience just getting lost in it, and then we did a couple other ones. So I was always interested in mixing, art and architecture, and I felt like video games with music was like the perfect combo. It's like the
Absolutely.
master, like it's like I think it's like one of the biggest things we've invented, and it's just an excellent medium to make anything really, and especially now with VR, it's gonna be even more sensorial, and but so yeah, I had that was my background, and after finishing this like one particular project, I did this like restaurant renovation, and it went well. I had some money, and then right after that finished, the restaurateur had an argument with the owner of the leaseholder of the building and with the investor, and the whole project fell through. Right after I had worked for like 6 months building this like beautiful interior, it all got scrapped. So they went in and they broke it all apart.
Oh no.
So I was like, what's, this is like completely atemporal, like you have to deal with all these people. And so after, in that downtime, that's when I discovered Proteus and Antichamber as well,
Oh yeah.
and the Stanley Parable. And I was like, you know what, this is beautiful. I'm just gonna do this. I have some free time. I'm gonna start modeling and learning how to code, and just go at it. And it's been 4 years now.
Well, we're glad you did. It's been
Thanks.
fruitful. You've already mentioned a bunch of the games that kind of served as your inspiration, but are there any others that really stick out to you in like your past that you can call back that were like kind of your like standout video games, the video games you're like, that's the game that got me going?
Sure, yeah. It has nothing to do with
No, they
with the current
they,
game, but
they mostly don't. We find.
all right,
I
yeah. I used to love Diablo and
yeah.
Age of Empires 2. That was like, we used to play. A friend had this awesome attic that had like 3 computers because his dad worked with like Microsoft and something. So he had like this whole LAN setup
Oh
in the
man,
attic. So like every time after middle school, we would go to his house and just play from like 4 till midnight.
nice.
Like order pizzas and just play Age of Empires. So like there was like no wood or anything in the map. We would like obliterate those maps, and and that was that was like really happy memories.
Mm,
Just being with friends, playing games till really late at night,
that's
and
what it's all about.
yeah, and it was also awesome back then because like not everybody had a computer.
Mm.
It's computers slowly trickled in, so it was like a friend had a computer, so we would all go there, and like we would sit around and watch him play, and then we would take turns. It was like this very communal thing.
Yeah, for sure. That isn't necessarily all around. When you're playing online multiplayer, it's not quite the
Yeah.
same. Not quite the same experience. So finally, to kind of bring this discussion to a close, we always ask what other indie projects out there that are currently being worked on have kind of caught your eye. So
Sure.
if you want to
Yeah.
give some shout outs to other indie dev teams or indie games.
Yeah, there's honestly quite a lot, and I've been that's the problem when you start working on the project, you go on this like deep end and
Yeah.
you kind of shut off from the outside world, and it's amazing to like come out of the cave, and find all this like amazing work. And there's honestly so many. You should probably I've been following them on Twitter, but I should probably make a list. But I was really impressed by Memory of a Broken Dimension.
Mm.
I think it's by Estra or XRA, and that was like really really interesting. Then I recently played Burn Band by I forget the name of the collective. It's those four guys that are doing some great work. Then I've been playing the work of Moshe Linke. It's his Between Wonders Between Dunes, and then the recent one Fugue in Void is really
Yes.
beautiful. The way he uses like cinema techniques to do the scenes. Basically like you have like these shots, and then it goes to another shot, and then another shot, and then you're playing, and then it's shots again. It's really interesting way of thinking about an experience. I really enjoy that, and there's so much probably like.
Oh, I know. There's more indie games than you could ever play, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh,
but
Naya Sans is a great one. That was
yeah.
a good one I recently got into now, and wow, it's just like going through this like big city, and it just like keeps going. It's really cool.
Awesome. Well, those are some great shout outs to other indie games that people might want to look into. Max, thank you for taking the time to talk to us about.
No problem. It was a
Z-
pleasure.
Yeah, it was great to have you on. Awesome stories. We'll have links, so if you are
Okay.
interested in buying 0 Degrees North and 0 Degrees West, please check it out. It's on Steam. It's on Itch. We'll have links to some of the other projects I've seen you've been working on Itch that have come out that are kind of in the same vein, really interesting. So we'll have links.
Oh
to all,
yeah,
all that
I
stuff.
released the game today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll have links to that too. We'll link your whole
Good game.
Itch page. So again, thank you so much for talking with us.
A pleasure.